to the Metropolitan Fire Chief Association's Leadership Development Podcast Series, where we explore the innovations and leadership strategies shaping the future of the fire service. This podcast is for Metro Chiefs by Metro Chiefs, engaging in conversations about the challenges and opportunities that matter most to the leaders in our association. And while this series is created with Metro members in mind, the topics that we explore are just as relevant to current or aspiring chief officers in departments of any size across the U.S. and around the world. I'm your host, Alec Otten with Aurora Fire Rescue, and today I have the distinct privilege and honor of sitting down with a true legend in the fire service, retired fire chief and renowned author and statesman, my opinion, Dennis Compton. Chief Compton is a respected executive advisor and the author of several books on leadership, management, and performance improvement. His published work includes numerous chapters and articles that continue to influence fire service leadership today. He served as the fire chief in Mesa, Arizona for 6 years, and as an assistant chief in Phoenix with a total of about 28 years of service there, bringing him to more than 3 decades of operational and executive leadership experience. In addition to his department service, Chief Compton has been a major contributor on the national stage. He's a past chairman of the executive board of the International Fire Service Training Association, past chairman of the Congressional Fire Service Institute National Advisory Council, and past chairman of the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation Board of Directors, and the past secretary of the International Public Safety Data Institute Board. So you've been busy. And not surprising at all, he's also the recipient of multiple prestigious awards and is widely regarded as a thought leader who continues to shape the fire service at every level. I'm so grateful you're here, and Chief, it's an honor to have you. I think that goes without saying. Is there anything that I missed in the introduction that you'd like our listeners to know about you?
Yeah, that was more than enough.
You lead with humility, right? I think we were talking before we started recording about how difficult it is for some of us to accept compliments, but you certainly earned every one of those compliments and the admiration of quite a few of our peers in the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Association. So without further ado, then we will dive in. And I'd really like to start at the beginning. You have had the privilege, I'm sometimes challenged, I'm sure, of having a front row seat to the evolution of the fire service. And so what stands out to you about how the fire service looked when you first started, and specifically things like what were the prevailing values and culture that you really remember from back when you kicked this career off?
Well, I've loved my career in the fire service from the very first day. And I wasn't one of those people that had always wanted to be a firefighter. I was in the Army. I got out of the Army in 1970, January 70. And a year later, I was on the fire department and had never thought about it. I just decided to take the test. So and a month later, I was out of the academy, and here we go. So what stood out to me most, as I think back on it especially, is that the people who were involved in the Phoenix Fire Department, and that's what I'll talk about because I really was not active in the fire service as a whole, but they were a proud group of people, and they thought that they were doing a great job and doing the best they could with what they had. And they were proud of that, and I was proud of that. The culture in Phoenix was probably much like it was in the rest of the country. I worked for 3 fire chiefs in Phoenix, 3 different fire chiefs, and each one of them brought something different to the organization, of course. I think that the thing that stood out to me more than anything else there was the way that things began to change in the mid-1970s. In a lot of different aspects. I was fortunate to get to work with and for Alan Brunacini. I was chief of training in 1978 when Alan became the fire chief in 1978. Uh, and we really didn't know each other. I'd met him once before when he was a battalion chief, came by the station. So we really did not know each other well. But it ended up being a blessing to me. It was like going to school every day in many ways. Bruno was an incredible man. He had a unique vision, and he was an idea guy. And he expected the people around him to follow through with those ideas and to, as best they could, bring them to fruition. So that was the change in the culture of the Phoenix Fire Department. I was a captain in 1976, and that is when it began to really shift. We had the ability at that time to begin to implement some things that were at the forefront of the fire service. Incident command is an example of that. I remember we started incident command with 3 procedures: command, staging, and sectors. That was the book. That was it. Those 3. And we went to the academy and they trained us in those 3, and we used them religiously after that, unless the building was on fire. And then it was Yahoo, back to the way it was before. So it took time, but that is when it began. Was in the mid 70s. I loved my introduction into the fire service and into the fire department, and I was very fortunate to get to work with some of the people around me.
So there's a saying that goes around, right? Is there's the fire service is 100 years of tradition unimpeded by progress, right? And I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think, you've seen it change incredibly, infinitely, probably over the years. And then there's another one where they talk about, there are 2 things that, firefighters, hate. That's the way it is, and then change, right? What did you do as a team, as an executive team? How did Chief Brunacini lead through that change? Because it wasn't an evolution, it was a revolution in a lot of ways, right? The way that he shifted that, the idea fairy, right? Flittering into your office and going, we're going to completely rework this. What do you think made him successful in promoting that kind of change in an organization that probably is really proud of who they were at the time? And how did your leadership traits help you navigate that alongside him?
There were a lot of different things, Alec, that entered into all of that. It was an evolution. And I don't buy into those 2 things you said either. I've seen so much and been involved in so much change in the fire service. But you look at what things were like back then, and that's the only way you can get a perspective on what happened in Phoenix. Is it like I said a few minutes ago, we were much like any other fire department in the country, as far as the way we were structured, their culture, all of it. And then what we did, what happened was we hired a fire chief from the inside who had a good set of experiences, who was well respected internally, who was well educated, and who had connections outside the fire department that were very beneficial to him and the organization. And he became the fire chief. Okay. Another thing that happened, and I don't know if you've seen this or not, but there was a change in the pension system about the time all of this was going on. And a ton of people left. Okay. When I came on the Phoenix Fire Department, there were 490 people on the department. When I left, there were 1,500 people on the department. Okay. So a lot of people, and it provided a lot of opportunity for young people, and people would complain about promoting young people, but who in the heck are you going to promote? Because that's all we've got is young people. And those people became very active and influential in the fire department. And a lot of the people who were already there were supporters of Brunacini. Not everybody was. I mean, that's la la land. There were people who tried to undo what he was doing, get in his way. All of that stuff happened, just like it happens everywhere. But bottom line, it was some things that just fell into place. There was a change in city government in the early 1980s, where we went from an at-large system to a district system, and man, did that change the overall look at things and the way we function. So I think that we changed that organization at the training academy. We trained our way out of the past and into what would become a different fire department.
So you were on the front line of that, right? In your position there, in embedding or institutionalizing his vision.
Our vision.
Okay, shared vision.
Something that guy was able to do better than anybody I've ever worked with was explain why and what. And I think that the ability for us to understand that, buy into it, get to the point where we weren't threatened by change, that's what really began that process, and it was in the early 1980s.
Well, it's so funny that you say that, his ability to explain why, which you had to be able to do also, right?
Absolutely.
It can be difficult to lead through other people because you would like them to speak with the purity and accuracy of your voice, right? Especially when it comes to that foundational conversation about the why. But it's just funny because we've got, great, brilliant authors out here that are writing books about this. And there are other people who are saying that the drive to understand why, or to, we have to explain everything to them. They'll talk about that in the context of a generational conversation, like this newer generation. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that people are people, right? They wanted to understand the background and the why behind what you were doing back in the mid-70s. It's not a new concept, that explaining rationale and background and being transparent and authentic is instrumental in change management. Am I hearing that right and interpreting that right?
Yeah, you are. And we were going through some difficult times in the Phoenix Fire Department in that generation. That time from 1970 to when I left in 1997, 98. It was a lot of change, a lot of significant change. We had labor problems. I was an officer in the union for several years, and in fact, a lot of people don't know that we actually took a strike vote in Phoenix in 1978. Unfortunately, we lost. It didn't pass. And that was the best thing that ever happened to us. But when Bruno became the fire chief in 1978, there was a lot of union city fire department strife that we had to work our way through. And I think that the experiences that we had when we were coming up through this, I know for sure the experiences I had in the union was very helpful to me in working our way through that. And we also, I think, had a very sophisticated group of labor leaders that were able to see where we were trying to go with all of this, and how beneficial it was actually going to be for the entire organization. And they were very active in that.
What do you think was, because we can't do what we do as fire chiefs without a solid partnership with our workforce, with labor, with the folks on the line who are kicking in the doors and saving people and putting the fires out and cutting people out of cars, right? In your opinion, in a leadership role and in both fire administration as well as past in the union, how does that become so successful, that partnership?
Well, I think that when you and me both went to school, they told us in our management classes and leadership classes that you needed to get buy-in from your workforce. You needed to get the workforce to participate in the organization, right? That they need to feel a sense of ownership to the work that's going on. And the communications needs to be regular, ongoing, and directed at inclusion. Okay, that's what they taught us. At no time did we use the word union in any of that. Okay, now for us, I think it was easier to do those things because we had a very strong, cohesive union. And if we wanted to be successful in those things, we had to do it with the union. They represented 95% of our people. You're just not going to be successful without that. So I can remember sitting at the kitchen table in Fire Station 1, and the guy that ended up becoming the union president, and myself, and a guy that became the business manager of the union, and some others that were there. And we were complaining about the fire department. And we promised each other, honestly, we said that if we ever get in any of those positions, it's going to be different. It's going to be different. And we were just young bucks, but we got in those different positions. We got a fire chief that bought into all of it. And we didn't develop, there's a program called Relationships by Objectives. It was developed in Phoenix for the fire service, but it was not developed by us. It created by us is a better word. It was created by the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service. And it was primarily for private sector corporations and companies who were just at a total impasse with their relationships, like we were in Phoenix. We just were not doing well. And the city manager agreed to bring in some mediators, and together we developed this program. It's still in place to this day. Okay. It's called Relationships by Objectives. It describes, defines, and guides the labor management process in the Phoenix Fire Department. And it is institutionalized. It has survived several fire chiefs, several union presidents, and it has been taken throughout the country. So I don't believe that Phoenix would have ever become the fire department it has become had we not had the ability to deal with our local in a positive, productive, and healthy way. People say, what was the difference? If you look back, what was the difference between what was going on in Phoenix and what was going on elsewhere? There's only one thing, and that was our labor management relationship. Because you only got X benthams of time. That's all you got. And you can use those benthams doing whatever you want. You can plan together. You can solve problems together. You can work through personnel issues together. You can do all kinds of things together. Or you can fight. You can dismantle one another. You can disrespect one another. You can file grievances. You can use up all those same benthams of time doing that other stuff. But you don't get any more time. That's all you have. So how do you want to use it becomes the question.
I love that. I mean, I think, that collaboration, I think everybody is stronger standing shoulder to shoulder with a common mission, right? And I think how important is humility, right? In a leadership role, whether that's in the local or whether that's in the fire chief's office, to get there, there's cooperation, there's collaboration, sometimes there's concessions, right, on both sides. But it truly is a relationship. It's like a family, right? That we have the same overarching goal, which is to care effectively for the community and make sure that we're healthy and well resourced, those kinds of things that make us better at doing that. But I think that requires that you shift the focus off of yourself, whoever you are, right? And onto the team and the mission and those kinds of things. And so do you see humility as a key attribute to leading effectively in that way?
Well, I think humility is one of the most important traits in leadership. I think personally that it is. I don't think ego is. I guess just to clarify that, I think humility is one of them, one of several. But we were taught when we first came on the fire department in recruit training that we were a team, that you don't do anything by yourself. In fact, you get in trouble for wandering off by yourself.
That's okay? Right.
So we're a team. What we accomplish together, we accomplish together. What we fail at, we fail together. But you may as well put all your stuff back on the truck and whatnot, because you're going to get to do it again and get it better next time. That has stuck with me throughout my career. We are a team. That doesn't mean that we don't beat each other up once in a while. And it doesn't mean that we don't disagree with each other once in a while. But what it does mean is we all got to come out the other side. Now, how do we get there? See, I honestly believe that the most precious leaders we have had over the years, and you said it when we were talking earlier about leaving a better situation, a plan for someone else to take up and complete what you started. See, that's what it's all about. We are here for a point in time, and that's all. And that has become more and more clear to me the older I've gotten. And as I've moved towards cutting back on my work, is that my job all along, and to this day, is to look beyond today. And what do we want things to be like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now? And what can we do in today's world to help make something happen out there? And I don't know what those will be, but I know what the foundation of them will be. And so I truly believe that humility guides us as a leader if we want to be regarded by our followers as competent and not in it for ourselves and not self-centered.
That's, I love listening to you talk about that, because I think, leaders can't be leaders without people who are willing to follow. And the willingness to follow is followership is an under-researched and documented, responsibility that I think we all have, right? Even at the fire chief level, right? We also often view the hierarchy, if you will, of the fire service as kind of a pyramid, right? With the fire chief at the top, when in fact it's more like an hourglass, right? We all have the obligation both to lead and to follow, whether that's you following a city manager or a council or a mayor. And I think we have to flip that from time to time. You have to have the art of leadership, but you also have the art of followership. And so I think it's people don't talk about it enough, that responsibility to follow, but also that it's a gift when you choose to follow somebody. Management is different than leadership, right? You can manage somebody's performance in their day-to-day operations, but to truly lead them and get them to share a vision with you, or to buy into your what becomes a shared vision, I think is really powerful. And we'll talk a little bit more about vision, because you mentioned something about our role in planting the seeds, right, for the trees, whose shade we'll never enjoy. This continuum of leadership that you build your building block so that next link in the chain can be added to it, and it kind of carries on. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you mentioned something that I wanted to go back to. You talked about Phoenix was like every other fire department in the nation, big city fire department in the nation in the 70s. What did that look like? What operationally, what from a leadership and management standpoint, from funding, from innovation, what was it about America's fire service then that looked like it needed change? I hope that question makes sense, but
it does.
Because it has to look like something where you go, hey, we can really make this better. And I'm curious what that looked like.
Well, our service delivery model was sometimes we were deployed into fire stations just like everyone else. We had either usually three, sometimes four people on our apparatus. Our supervisors were promoted primarily for their knowledge and skills in firefighting. Okay? There was very little, if any, supervisory training for the workforce, including the officers. Okay? They were very competent, though, many of them, not all of them, but many of them were very competent. They were hired and promoted for that competence. But and they were very happy with the way things were, which I saw a lot in the fire service. Let me see if I can explain it this way. I don't know if this will make any sense or not, but there was nothing wrong with it back then. We had the best resources they could get us, which weren't very good at times. I mean, the gloves I wore as a firefighter were the same gloves that the sanitation workers wore in the city of Phoenix. I had to buy my own day boots. There weren't any issued. The coats were bought like you buy pencils. That was the cheapest you can get, and as many as you can get. It was just, but we didn't know that. We thought we were in hog heaven, But here's when I was coming up through the system, I thought that the fire administration didn't like us, and particularly didn't like me and my generation. Not just me personally, but my generation. Because every time we wanted to do something different, it seemed that we got pushed down into our place, if you will. And I didn't understand that until I got into those positions. Because what was going on back then is we wanted to improve every aspect. I mean, I could list them, but we wanted to improve every aspect of what we did, including our safety and our equipment and that type of stuff. And the people we were bringing this to were very happy with what they had built. They worked hard for those jobs, and they got them. And they fixed everything that needed fixed as far as they were concerned. And now here come these youngsters. You see this today. Here come these youngsters wanting to change it. And what the upper echelon is thinking, change it. Hell, you don't even understand it. And here we go. Yeah. Then I got into those jobs. And boy, did we work hard changing things. And we added and we revised and we got in place what many of us felt was a much better situation. But then what happened? Here they come. These younger people who are not like us, wanting to change it. And I caught myself doing the very same thing. Is change it. Hell, we just fixed it. And down they go. And it just hit me that you have to be able to manage generationally in a long-term position of leadership. If we turned over every 5 or 10 years, like the other books say, then it would be different. But it isn't. Is we stay a long time. And we have to be able to survive that and to make the next generation effective. And we can't do that. I've learned that when you diss the past, you diss the people who lived it. And a lot of them still have relatives and friends on the job. So you not only diss the past, but you diss them too.
So in a lot of ways, there's this mutual respect, right? The acknowledgement of the changes that have been made over the years from the line to leadership, but also from the leadership to the line, saying, like, we don't have all the answers, and we appreciate this feedback, acknowledge the change and the improvements that we've made, but also be willing to listen to some of those potentially innovative ideas around change that what I'm hearing you say that you had when you were online, right? That I had when I was online.
Yeah.
And I think to some extent, a lot of us forget that about ourselves. It's funny, you hear the generational conversation again, right? That the younger generation is disrespectful and doesn't stand when their parents come. Right? This is what Aristotle or Socrates, one of the two that said that. I mean, this conversation's been going on forever, because I think there's a tendency sometimes as we get older and wiser that we forget that we were that person who was trying to drive leadership towards innovation and towards change when we were online in the fire station. And we forget that when we're in the leadership role, that was potentially us, right? And fail to appreciate that energy and enthusiasm and creativity that came along with us when we were running the streets on the rigs and having that kind of fun, taking care of the community.
But I think when you come to grips with that organizationally, that first of all, this is not a new problem, and being effective over a long term is not a new concept. Other organizations have lived it, and many have failed it. So what will it take for us to not fail at? That is a huge question.
Humility, introspection, honesty with ourselves,
A ton of introspection.
All of those things.
And I think respect for people. You want people to respect you, they're not going to respect you if you don't respect them first. It's just not going to happen.
Agreed.
You talked about humility. Respect is another one. It doesn't matter whether you're the fire chief or anyone else. If you don't respect other people first, they're not going to respect you. It just isn't going to happen. It doesn't work that way.
Thank you. Well, we're going to move on. When we want to talk about the past and the perspective from your time at Phoenix and Mesa, what it was like then, and I think we've done a good job at that. But the fire service has evolved. It has evolved significantly over your time affiliated with it, right? Not just your time in operations, in leadership in 2 departments, but also with the Metro Chiefs. And you're there every year. Every year I've been there, you're there as well. So you continue to be part of the fire service leadership. We talk about, as the Metro goes, so goes the fire service. So you continue to influence that now. But so we've come a long way, and you've seen it from, shifting away from fire, probably towards this all hazards response, and, paramedicine to start, community paramedicine, emergency management, all of these things. And so we've come a long way. But from your perspective, for the contemporary fire chief, what are the biggest challenges that you think that they're facing in today's environment?
That I don't know if it's more difficult being a fire chief today than it was before, but I know it sure is a lot more complicated. Just from the people I know and around, and the people I talk to all the time, counsel time to time.
Well, I really want to hear more about that.
When I went to Mesa from Phoenix, I was not looking for a job. I was fine where I was at. But I had an offer there that I just couldn't refuse. I could retire and get a pension. Anyway, that was fun because a lot of things came into place there that worked out really well. The mayor, the city manager, the union president, many of the chief officers and members wanted me there. So I went into that pretty lucky, I guess you would say. And was able to use a lot of what I had learned, not make Phoenix over again. Holy cow, they'd have thrown me out of there. but just to help them make that organization better. If that same thing, and they were a Metro fire department. You got to remember that they were a Metro fire department who was managed and led like it wasn't. The whole structure, everything about it, was very much authoritarian in structure and in actions. Okay. So your question was the complexity of today's people. What are they faced with that might be different? There are probably several things. And like I said, I don't know if they're different or just more complicated. But I think one is the whole issue of safety and wellness. That has expanded so much over the years when you look at the full breadth of it, that it's got to be almost like a whack-a-mole game every once in a while for you. That every time you think you're doing pretty well, something else pops up over here. It's a major issue, from EVs to cancer to heart disease, turnouts that might be contributing to your poor health. I mean, it's just one thing after another, it seems like, for you. And transitioning the system away from the structure that it was before, where I don't think we were structured to be able to handle a situation like that. We were out in front of all of that. We were where an FPA 1500 was originated.
Right.
So we were able to get out ahead of it, not react to it. But it seems a lot of what's going on today is more complicated and it's just more diverse with regards to safety and health. The other thing I think that you all have a real challenge with is unity. And I don't say that because I think it. I say that because many people have told me that. Union presidents, fire chiefs, unity of the fire service is one of its strengths. It's one of the things that has provided opportunities for us to do some incredible things, was the unity that we had that manifested itself in so many ways. But they tell me about how politics has changed that in some ways in the fire stations and in the fire departments. They tell me about generational differences in people that don't necessarily contribute to unity. And not because people are good or bad, it's just difference. But we got where we're at today, and we will get where we get tomorrow because we are able to unify around our issues. Whether it be chiefs and unions or volunteers and careers or Democrats, Republicans, and independents. I worked on politics, fire service politics, for more than 20 years, nationally. At no time was my work partisan. It was always nonpartisan. Always. It is to this day. The people who are doing that work to this day. It has to be. And you understand why, and so does everyone else listening to this podcast. You simply can't pick teams. You can't become one of the shirts or one of the skins. You have got to be able to achieve results no matter who you're trying to influence.
That's one of the beauties of the fire service. You know, if you just describe it in the context of responding to a fire, is when the tones go off in the station, we have no idea where we're going, right? We have no idea who we're going to go serve, what they look like, who they voted for, who they love, you know, any of those things, right? It is, and then when we're crawling through smoke, we reach out and touch you and pull you out of that building. We have no idea what you look like or anything about you. It really is the ultimate blind service, and it's an equitable service, right? We serve the community in the same way, but it does get politicized, right? In a lot of settings, and I see what you're saying. I don't think I've heard anybody articulate it like that. That unity is a problem. I've seen some crises of culture in different fire departments, you know, where I feel like members of the organization have lost sight of why we're here, right? But I hadn't tied that in my mind to disunity, you know, or a fracturing of the fire service. How do we? I mean, if you have the answer to this, here's your next book, right? But how do we address that? How do we fix that as, you know, metro departments, as U.S. fire departments or international fire departments? Like, where do we even start?
Most effective change that I've seen and been involved with has been change through training. It doesn't happen anywhere else. Okay. To this day, I still see chief officers, especially, send out something electronically to the workforce. And as far as they're concerned, that change is in place. I sent it out. It's in place. That is naive at best, because until what's ever in there has been transformed into a training package and people now know and are explained why and what and whatnot, that's when that communication takes place. Okay, so I think go back to your followership for a second, because I'm trying to say this in a way that is doable. Okay. Do you know any leaders? And I'm not just asking you, I'm asking the audience here. Do you know of any leaders in your fire departments who are a lot better leaders than they are followers? That they suck as followers. In fact, if their boss did to them what they do to their boss, they croak sometimes. Okay. I don't think we teach followership, but look how important it is. When you have people at various levels of the organization pushing down the people around them and on top of them so that they can appear to be on top, the smartest, the brightest, the best, that impacts unity big time. And it's an issue of being able to follow a leader. And a leader being able to bring these people into a group where they can coalesce and want to follow. But are they following you or are they following the organization? That's an important question. Because I like to make it clear, and I hope other people do too, that what you're following is the organization to the next phase. I'm more like a tour guide than anything else.
I was thinking a salesman. I like tour guide better, right? Because
here's where we're going.
Yeah. And I want to show you all the exciting things along the way, right?
Yeah. What do you all think? And next thing you know, it doesn't necessarily look like what you had. But unity comes from a sense of belonging, a sense of equality, and trust and respect for one another. And with those, you end up with this situation that people call a unified group. I watched a fire service that was not all that well unified, tried to get through the political systems in Washington, D.C., and it didn't do very well. When I first began, I watched that. I also watched when the Congressional Fire Services Institute was able to come into play and develop their council, their advisory council, that would provide opportunities for the organizations to work together on common, agreed upon agenda items. Agreed upon. But we did it unified. We did it with one voice. Before one voice became more popular, we did it with a voice. So I've seen the impact of unity. I've seen the impact of disunity too, and I saw it my entire career. I've seen it, and the way you do it is through training, and once the group gets to the point where they will not allow themselves to be derailed. I'm not talking about adjusted. I'm talking about knocked off the tracks of the rickety roller coaster. Knocked off the tracks. When that group, not the fire chief, not just the union president, when that group decides that we're done doing that, we're not putting up with it anymore, you're screwing things up for all the rest of us. And we've got all this that needs to be done, including our customers that would certainly like to have great service from us. And we need to come together to do that. I think the way you treat people, then I'll get off of this, but the way you treat people who are having issues has a lot to do with that issue of unity as well. Because we hire people for the majority of their adult work life.
Right.
And then you got to ask yourself, what are the chances of someone having a problem in the majority of their adult work life that ends up affecting their work? What are the chances of that? I would say damn near 100%.
Yeah, I agree.
And everybody knows that. So how do you deal with somebody who's having those issues? And how does the organization get to view that? As you talk about compassion, but do you have any?
Right.
You talk about empathy, but do you show it? You talk about our most precious resource being people, but do you believe that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, our story, and we experienced with the death of a child while I was working for a fire department, and watching how my leader at the time, and him, Ron Maston, who's part of our association as well, was my fire chief at the time, and the way he cared for my family while we were going through that left a lasting imprint on me and shifted my leadership style. For years, you walk around with this sort of strict understanding of performance, like you get paid to do this job, you should be doing this job well, and my blinders on, failing to recognize exactly what you just said, which was if we want you to work here for 30 years, we should be prepared to and supportive of riding the roller coaster of life with you, right? The marriages, celebrating the marriages, mourning the divorces or the deaths, celebrating the births. It's this wave that we're going to ride, and there will be peaks and valleys in their performance in that time. And as leaders, we have to be prepared to ride that with them and recognize that you can't divorce life and work, especially in this industry, that it's one person who's, got all of these things going on. And I think that was one of the things that Ron taught me, that I have really tried to, the rules are in place for a reason, right? We all have rules that we have to abide by, but there are ways within those rules to care for people in a very impactful way that creates this, a loyalty in a lot of ways, right? Because you were faithful to me and my family when we were going through that. And I love that you said that, because I think it really, interestingly, that's not what becomes publicized, right? The way you care for somebody whose family member's going through, a significant battle with cancer, or who loses their child in a motor vehicle crash or whatever. Those, a lot of times for people in our industry, are very, very private events. And there's a lot of times only the fire chief and the member and maybe some of their chain of command knows how you navigated that with them, how you cared for them. And we can't, as fire chiefs, stand up here and tell you all of the things and, pound our chests and, you don't know what I did for, whatever. That's not how this whole thing works. But the discipline seems to just run like wildfire when we do actually have to take some sort of adverse action. And it seems to lead to headlines, right? The news media today, if it bleeds, it leads, right? They're always looking for the next bit of drama that can be dropped in their 6 o'clock news cycle and lead off their broadcast. In a lot of ways, it becomes the same here. The victories, the care and concern, the empathy and compassion tends to not be public at all, right? It tends to be, but those folks become your advocates and your really loyal followers, right? And faithful followers, and then they can share that message, right? If they choose to. But I think, I love that you talk about that, because I think that is instrumental in we talk about retention. You take care of your people as they ride this roller coaster of life, and you will retain incredible humans that do the work for your organization, your community. And so, thank you for sharing that. The trust piece you brought up, I think, is really interesting, because I've heard, you earn trust in drops and you lose it in buckets. But interestingly, trust takes a lot of, like, what we're doing right here today, this dialogue and this, sharing of really authentic and vulnerable experiences, and the foundation of your leadership philosophy is what it takes. And a lot of that trust is built in a one-on-one environment, which is super difficult to do in metropolitan fire departments. And is a real challenge today, I think, because we have all this technology, but does anything replace sitting down at the kitchen table in a fire station for coffee with the troops? And I would suggest no. But how can you do that, right, on a routine enough basis? Because it takes that time and takes consistency to build that trust. So when you went to Mesa, how did you do that? You were shifting from an autocratic environment into what you want, which is the human-centered leadership. At least that's what I'm hearing. Very collaborative, very interactive, and how did you do that in a metropolitan department in a manner that was effective in gaining the trust of and gaining followership, the gift of followership?
Well, when I went into that department in Mesa, I could not have asked to be better received. I think I may have said that earlier. I was amazed. I pretty much knew that was going to happen because I had been in deep discussions with the people in the organizations, especially the union and even city management. But you know what the most difficult thing for me coming from the outside into that organization? I didn't know who I could trust.
All right.
I didn't have any history with people. I didn't know who had been divorced from who had once been disciplined for something with somebody else, who was related to who. I didn't know any of that. So I had to be very careful about agendas and whatnot. So I didn't make any big public announcements. I went to all the fire stations, just like you probably did. We had 21 fire stations. I went to all of them. I conducted a survey with every one of them on all three shifts, and pretty much developed a 5-year plan around the input that I received from them and the city manager and the mayor and council. Okay, and I was never one to stay in my office all the time. In Phoenix, I developed a plan when I became assistant chief to get to all the fire stations on all the shifts in Phoenix once every 2 years. And I actually had how many stations and which stations I'd go at shift change. So I did 2 shifts, one coming in, one going on. It took me about 4 years because of all the things that get in the way. But at least you're working towards it. You're working towards communicating.
That's great. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, I mean, in the contemporary, my assumption is, growing up in the fire service and in leadership, when you were there, a lot of the technology didn't exist. We're meeting over Teams. You're in Arizona and I'm, in Colorado, and we're talking to each other in real time and using technology to communicate better. But technology can also be a real challenge for fire chiefs today. How do you see it different, and what do you think the impact is? I mean, I'm sitting here with 2 cell phones and a computer that I take home every night, and unrestricted access, right, to me from city manager and the mayor and any of the 10 council members. Is that benefiting the fire service, or is it challenging the fire service, or both? And how does that impact today's fire chiefs, in your opinion?
I think it's benefiting the fire service, just like technology probably benefits every discipline, I would think. It beats the hell out of the fire chief, and the other people, by the way, who carry those phones, and the other people who are Um, Technology has been something that we've dealt with incrementally throughout our careers. You know, cell phones replaced pagers. Uh, Pagers were an interruption, but it wasn't as easy to use them as it is today with the technology that's available to you. So for every good thing that comes with technology, and there are lots, I think that the real toll it takes is on the humans. I don't think that's a positive thing for people I don't think people, I don't think it should be wrong for someone to shut off their cell phone. And maybe even have some other mechanism to contact you besides a cell phone that only certain people have.
Yeah, it takes the discipline, right, of leadership to create an environment where people can disconnect. Right?
This isn't going to change either.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to be less technology.
Right.
You're not going to be less accessible. You know, but
so the humans have to fix that, right? We've got
humans
to
have to fix it
those boundaries
with human interventions, and you know, there's all kinds of issues that you as a fire chief have to deal with, and these are groups that you have to make contact with on a regular basis, or you lose them. You lose them. And that's people like your elected officials, your boss, your the union. Something we didn't talk about that we need to is opinion leaders, because it comes back to something you said a few minutes ago. I'll try to remember that in a second. To your direct reports, to city leaders, stakeholders, all kinds of people. But one of the things I put at the very top of that is you and your family. Is in all of these things that you're responsible for maintaining that connection with, too often we lose that one. That one doesn't get the family doesn't get the attention that it needs. And the next thing you know, you not only have problems at work, you got problems at home. And it's not uncommon to see that in the fire service. And it's only a human, you're not going to get a piece of technology that's going to solve that one for you.
That's right.
Only the humans involved can deal with that. Cher has been side by side with me forever. We've been married 57 years. Okay. And God bless her.
Yeah. She's a saint, right?
She is a saint. Yes. And just like Crystal is, she's a saint, you know. But the idea of all of this is for you to maintain all those relationships and connections so you can come out the other end with the organization successful. That's what the purpose is. Sometimes we lose sight of the purpose is that we're more effective as an organization, that we're more efficient as an organization. That's where we're trying to go with all this stuff. And you don't want to go there without your family.
Right.
You know? And it's quite, you know, this generation thing that we were talking about earlier, some of the younger people have it right regarding what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, the work-life balance concept.
And relationships. And it pisses us off sometimes, probably. But they might have a better understanding of the impact of that than we do, because I came up as a baby boomer that was, you know, I was supposed to work, make money, come back to work, make money, go home.
Right.
You know, we were talking about how do you impact unity, if you don't mind me going back to that.
No, please.
Something came up here that I don't know, we didn't talk about, but I think it can be very effective for you. Is you have all these formal groups that you deal with in the organization, but one that's not a formal group is what I call opinion leaders. Okay? They're in every organization. Not a lot of them, but there are plenty. And who they are people in the organization that the other people in the organization tend to listen to. They have credibility. They have wisdom as far as other people are concerned. And people listen to them. Okay? And it's not because they're the loudest, and it's not because they're the smartest, and it's not because they're the strongest. It doesn't matter what their rank is either. These are opinion leaders. I don't think we utilize them to their full potential in an organization that we're trying to create unity, because they can be the basis of that unity. They're often, they're places you're not. They're places where your supervisors aren't. They're everywhere. And I always like to get the opinion leaders together once in a while and run things by them.
Yeah.
And see what they think.
Well, I think it's hard from our office, window to see the impacts of the policy and programmatic decisions that we make, the impact at the line level, yes, without asking those questions and incorporating them into those conversations. And, one of the challenges that I have in leadership is I like to share the things that I'm thinking about because I want that feedback. What you risk is, well, the chief came in here and said, this is where we're going, right? It's not where we're going because I'm not going to make that decision independent of your input because I need that feedback. So those folks are crucial, I think, for the success, or for at least us getting a good comprehensive understanding of the impact of our decisions. And we have to be humble enough to listen, and we have to be listening in the first place, and we have to be willing to shift direction a little bit or adjust the course a little bit to make sure that we take those concerns into consideration. And I think we were talking about building trust earlier. I think listening is a key part of building that trust, but it has to be reflected in the decisions that you make. You have to have incorporated some of that feedback in the decisions that you make. And then you have these champions that are embedded in the places that you aren't,
They're everywhere.
But great.
People listen to them, and people listen to them.
Yep.
And if an opinion leader gives you a suggestion when you're talking about something that you're thinking about, take it. Take their suggestion. And what you just said a second ago, Alec, is so important. When you get input from people about something you're thinking about doing with the fire department, when you use it, use their exact words. Don't change it into managementese. Use their exact words when you write it down. Use their exact words when you say it, because they will see their input and hear their input in what you're doing.
It's brilliant. What about if you can't? What if you can't incorporate their feedback? No, I mean, what if you can't incorporate their feedback? I guess is my question, because there are times that that they might not see a legal reason that we can't do, or a fiscal reason that we can't do, or even politics, right? We talked about that earlier, why we can't do it. You owe it to them to close the loop with them, right?
Exactly.
And explain why.
Tell them why.
Got it.
And ask them, is there something else we could do that might improve this other than exactly what you said, or exactly what you're recommending? Is there anything else? No, you can't always do that. When I said yes, you can, I meant words. I mean, you can clean that up. But if it's if it's a complete concept that you just simply can't do, tell them.
Yeah.
You don't forego being the boss because you believe in all these gee whiz things about human resource management. Sometimes you are the boss, and sometimes you need to act like it. And and some people, by the way, like it when you finally act like it. And then there are people who might not. But sometimes things are beaten around the organization enough that someone needs to decide. But you need to be very wise in the way you do that. When I went over to Mesa, they wanted a brush hat. And I'll never forget this. It was hilarious. They wanted a brush hat. So they put together a committee to decide which one to wear. Okay. So they come back to me. They asked for a meeting with me, and then they come back with 2 hats, and they want me to pick it. And I told them, I'm not picking that hat. If I pick that hat, it becomes my hat. And for all the people who like that hat, they like me. And for all the people that don't like that hat, they don't care for me. And I'm not falling for that. You guys put together this group to decide on a hat. Pick one.
That's right.
And that translates, by the way, into pretty complex issues.
Yep.
You know.
Well, I like that, having people want to have say, but they also need to. I love what you said about using their words, right? If you're going to give me this suggestion, I'm happy to take it. I appreciate that feedback, and we'll run with it. But also don't back away from your idea, right? If it doesn't work, or if it's not well received, like we tried it, and own it, and take responsibility for it, and figure out what new direction that we're going to go, I think is also really important. And I've experienced both things, right? People who are like, yeah, that was my suggestion. I thought it was a really good idea. It didn't quite work out, right? We've all been on fires like that didn't work out quite the way we anticipated. We're not trying to fail, but I think acknowledging a failure or a misstep or something that didn't go quite right is okay. That means you're human, but you have to own it, right? The accountability for it is super important. And I love that leadership style too, because it allows people to have an influence in the way the organization goes, but it also helps them learn some leadership lessons about the accountability that comes along with decision making, right? You don't get to delegate the responsibility for the decision to someone else. Your idea, right? So we're going to go way over an hour, which I hope you're okay with that. But we do have one last component of this, and you mentioned when we were talking about technology and its impact, the good and the bad, right? The efficiency that it brings, but also the human toll that it potentially takes. So expanding on that a little bit, like we want to look at the future of the fire service, I'm curious in your crystal ball that I know you have, because that's how you kept sharing your life for so long, because you could predict the future. What things should I not do?
It's more like a snow globe.
Well, shake up your snow globe. And if I were to give you a whiteboard to draw a picture of the fire service in 2040 or beyond, what would you be planning for now in order to make your organization successful to meet the needs of our communities in 2040 or 2050 or 2060?
The way you structure your planning would be an important piece of that. We quit doing 10-year plans. You remember that? Because you couldn't project out that far.
Right.
But in reality, we didn't quit. And so it doesn't matter if it's 10, 20, 30, or 40. Some things fit into a 40-year vision, some things into a 20-year vision, some things into 10, some things only 5 or less. Okay. So how would I structure it? First of all, I would initiate an understanding, hopefully, that the standard organizational structure of organizations is not going to carry us to the future. It's simply not going to do it. And by that, I mean a standard hierarchy. Okay? You have to have one, because if you don't have one, you're in trouble with the city because those things are budget accounts as well. Okay. But when you operate that way, it damn near shuts down the organization, Alec.
Right.
In other words, there's very little two-way communications. There's a lot of silos. There's just you're not pleasing the citizens. You're pleasing the boss. So anyway, enough of that. But I would think I would transition to a whole different way of looking at an effective organization. And I would take those divisions that we have and I'd put them around a structure where the public was in the middle of that structure and the people who ride your fire trucks and inspect your buildings and teach your kids fire safety, they're in the center of that. And all of us, managers and leaders, are on the outside of it. And our job is to make it effective, as absolutely effective as we can make it. And let's do this kind of hierarchically for a second. Because if you said fire service, I'm assuming you meant nationally, state, regional, local.
Yes.
Nationally, we still don't have a strong representation at the federal level from an agency standpoint. And we're such an important part of the safety and well-being of the nation, But we simply don't. We have the United States Fire Administration, which is no longer a presidential, well, it is a presidential appointment, but it's not a confirmed position. We reside under FEMA. Everybody's got heartburn right now because of what's not known about what's going to happen with FEMA. So one thing that we could go back to the drawing board on is what would it look like to have a formal, hierarchical federal agency that dealt with fire and life safety in the United States and was the principal advisor to Congress, the executive branch, states, in causing that to occur. So not under any other group, but a standalone federal agency, funded, didn't rely on passed down money from FEMA or anyone else. Until we have that, we are and also ran. Now, I don't mean to say it like that, but it's true. Okay? At the state level, we've got to get much better at sharing our resources. The state level. Some states more so than others, and you're one of them. That have got to, and Arizona is one of them. That ought to have a lot of latitude in doing that, and they ought to get funding from this federal entity to help cause that to happen. If it's true that these agencies are not intended to come in and handle your problems for you, which is true, then they have to have the ability to help you handle your problems. So I would see this conceptually, this federal agency being able to provide assistance and direction and leadership to state fire agencies, whatever you want to call them. I think in that we need to have a process for adopting codes. We have allowed the code system to be bastardized. I mean, I know of places that are still using codes from the 1990s. Okay. And they don't want to change them because the building community doesn't want to change them. So some capability to influence that is a significant issue. So you got the federal agency, you've got the assistance to states, you've got the ability to legislatively influence those codes. Okay. And then you have the need to be more politically influential at the local level so that you can get the resources you need to function. So I think it would be structured kind of like that. And I don't think you want a laundry list of all the responsibilities of those. But we lack some of that. In other words, if that's a food chain, we've got pieces of the food chain that aren't in place. Right. And if it took 40 years to screw it up, we can have 40 years to fix it. and what it might include, I don't know. But there's no place for it to happen up here. And there's no resources for it to happen at the state level because nothing, not much anyway, drifts down. And we're constantly at a disadvantage in the legislative process, I think, at the state level in most states.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. And we're seeing that, the legislation of building codes now, that's an interesting shift from what we're accustomed to. And watching that happen and those legislative initiatives pass. So
then the other part of your question is I think that one of the things that I would hope to see if I were still alive in 40 years is the ability to transfer firefighters with their credentials to other locations within the country. In other words, a credentialing process that allows
more mobility.
Yes. So that we don't lose people.
Yeah, I mean, recruitment and retention is a conversation, I think, in every corner.
It is. Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, I think, too, building bridges to new workforce is super important, too, because I think it's critical we have to plant these seeds and grow these kids that have an interest in the fire service, from a young age. And I think that's crucial. Operationally speaking, are we getting outpaced by risk, the emerging risks? Like you talked about EVs, even this different suppression. I mean, it was just something that came out from the IAFF, post research on the blankets that many departments had been using. The technology seems to be moving at a faster pace, whether that's in the oil and gas industry or in energy storage devices or building materials and design. Like, are we being outpaced by technological changes as a fire service? And is there a way? And if the answer is yes, how do we get ahead of that? I mean, it's almost like we need to have a futurist, a data analyst, a GIS analyst, and a futurist on each fire department that's going to help us start to prepare for these emerging technologies, things that when you and I were watching Star Trek, it was just a dream, and now a lot of it's a reality. So, I guess that's a lot of questions, but are we being outpaced? If we are, how do we get ahead of that?
We are being outpaced, and it's been going on for a while. There's no, to answer your question directly, there's no central location where new products or technologies are passed through this risk analysis before they're on the market. The way we do our risk analysis is to respond to the scene of one of them that we have no idea how to deal with that. And from then on, it becomes an issue. from that point on. But I think from the standpoint of public safety, there needs to be a council or some process where I mean, we do it with copyrights, we do it with trademarks, we do it with all kinds of stuff. We need a process by which no product will enter the market until there's a risk assessment done on it. And then once that assessment's done, an intervention strategy for dealing with the risk, especially when it's the level of risk that you and I are talking about right now. I mean, that's significant. And EVs, they're one of many. And there are going to be more. And the Star Wars stuff is going to come to pass, you know. But I think that would help a lot of it. And there were qualified representatives that were affiliated with that council. And the purpose of the council isn't to restrict innovation. It's to make sure that we've considered the safety of the public in that process.
That's great. We, I had it, as you well know, I sent you some of the questions that I intended to answer, and we went completely off script for the majority of this, which I loved. Like I told you that was going to happen. And talking to you, that's exactly what's happened, and it's been amazing. So I had a little section on about legacy and about leadership and humans. We covered almost every question that I had to ask you throughout this conversation. The role of humility, the fire service, how it's impacted you professionally and personally, how you've balanced that, lessons that you learned that shaped you throughout your journey. And so we covered so much of that. And so before we kind of close out, I'd just like to ask you, if you had one piece of advice that you could share with a fire chief who's stepping into this role now for the first time in 2025, a brand new fire chief, and you could give them this nugget, right? Your elevator pitch, if you will, of fire chiefing, what would that be?
I don't know if there is one, but I'll pick one just for the heck of it. It's love your job and love the firefighters. If you don't, you're going to have a hell of a time being successful. Because that job that you've got sitting there where you're at, that's not a walk in the park. There are a lot of challenges that come with that, personally and professionally. But we shouldn't lose our love for the fire department or lose our camaraderie with the way we feel about each other in a fire department just because we promoted. The promotion shouldn't be the end of the thing that we've cherished most about being a firefighter. When I go to retirement gatherings, and I've retired several times, but when I go to retirement gatherings, they don't talk about the budgets that were created. They don't talk about how fast someone put their SCBA on. They don't talk about any of that stuff. They talk about you, the type of person you were, the way you carried yourself, the way you treated other people. He or she was really good to work with. That kind of stuff is what they talk about.
Right.
And don't lose that because you're promoted. That there are going to be haters. They just hate harder when you go up the chain of command for some reason. I don't know why. But there are also lovers who, and they're often not as loud, but they are there.
Yeah.
And spend time with them. Try to balance that. Spend time with people who are on a mission to make the organization better, just as you end up spending time with people who are trying to bring the organization down. You know, when I was a shift commander, I had a battalion chief that I found out was avoiding fire stations where people were not real receptive to them. They just didn't go there. You know, they went to the stations where everybody was happy with them, greeted them positively. And if you think about the reality of that, the people who really needed more time with you, the people who really needed to get to know you better and understand you better, you didn't go to them because you spent time only with the people that made you happy. And you need to devote time and energy to people in the organization that need it as a supervisor, need you to be a supervisor, and need it for their own well-being. You're not going to change everybody, but man, if you can change those opinion leaders, if you can deal with them effectively, man, you've solved a lot of your problems. And I'm not sure we always see that. It's a lot easier to love our job and to love our firefighters when we have people influencing that when we're not even there. I love being a firefighter to this day. I love it. I was so fortunate to find this. And even as I moved into roles at the national level, there was not one single time I didn't enjoy what I was doing. And for that, I'm fortunate. But it's also kind of a mindset. Someone told me one time, it was a long time ago, with regards to this real jerk of a battalion chief that we had. And he said to me, he said, that guy can't do anything to me in 24 hours that I can't get over in 48. And I've always remembered that they're not going to dictate to me. They're not going to cause me to accept things that are unacceptable. They're not going to cause me to make lousy decisions. They're not going to cause me to make decisions where I lose the opinion leaders. Because I need them.
That's great.
And turnover, recruitment, retention, turnover, training, all those things impact that. Unity, that needs to be top of that list. Is that sense of unity in the organization.
Well, that's fantastic advice, and I think probably most of the people that are listening to this and hearing about your continued passion for the fire service, we'd take you back in a heartbeat. But I think Sherry might have something to say about that. I'm pretty sure, but it's definitely great to hear.
It's just, and I don't live in La La Land, and I certainly don't have any rose-colored glasses. I've had some very hurtful things in my career, some very difficult situations. But in the overall scheme of things, you've got to, you said, what would I want to see in 40 years? When you come on the job, what would you like to see in 25 or 30 or 35 years regarding yourself? Mm-hmm. Just yourself. And I don't mean what rank you achieved or any of that stuff. I'm talking about how do you want to come out the other end of this thing? Because that's a tough job. Being a firefighter is a tough job. I don't care what anyone says. And it's what you make it.
I agree with that. I think it's a decision. It's like a marriage, right? It's a decision every day to work hard at it and to maintain that relationship. Denny, I'm super grateful for you and for your time, and not just your time today, but really for the decades of service that you've given to our industry, right? And at the local, state, national levels, contributing, and your continued contributions, the wisdom that you share, the statesmanship that you and I have discussed, that you just set the bar so high. The way you present yourself and your thoughts is really remarkable, and it serves as an example for all of us. So I'm grateful for that. You've influenced generations of firefighters and leaders, and you continue to do that. And I know because of who you are, you're not looking to leave a legacy, but I would argue that you've definitely done that in the fire service and in the circles in which you travel. And I'm grateful to have had an hour and a half of your time just to talk about that and learn from you. So thank you for being part of this and for sharing who you are as a fire chief and as a human. So I'll just wrap up. I mean, but
the thanks really goes to you because you are creating this for the benefit of career development for Metro Chiefs. That's why we're doing this. It's why you've done the others. And that's a heck of a contribution on your part. The fact that I was able to play a small role in that is very nice. And thank you for allowing me to do it. But thank you even more for spending your time and your energy trying to make others more effective.
It's an absolute privilege. So that's it for today's episode of the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Leadership Development Podcast. And thank you to everybody who carved out some time to listen to it. This series is created by Metro Chiefs for Metro Chiefs, but as we've seen today, the lessons that we talk about here apply to leaders at every level across departments of all sizes, both here in the U.S. and around the world. Our European partners, I know, listen to this as well. And leadership is leadership. People are people. That's what we talked about, independent of generations, independent of geography. And so definitely useful feedback and information. So if you enjoyed this conversation, we hope that you'll subscribe to this podcast and leave us a review, share it with your colleagues, anybody who you think might benefit from listening. And if you have ideas for topics that we should cover, please send us an email. It'll be at the end of this podcast, so you can share it with us, and we'll try and get after it and get on that topic. So stay safe, innovate, don't be afraid of it, don't be afraid of change, explain the why, and until next time, please continue to live out the Metro vision of being a place to belong, inspiring success. Have a great day.